The Vedic afterlife, gates and thresholds, earth, smoke, and the road to the fathers. Where the word begins with a ledger and the Greek shore with an oboe, the Vedic threshold begins at the hearth, an ember, a smoke line, and a sun feeding the fire, while the household speaks the name. The funeral fire, Antyesti ritual, is not mere symbolism. Agni, the sacred fire, is the carrier of oblations and the agent who escorts offerings upwards and the dead onwards. In the oldest hymns, the path to the fathers is therefore less a guarded gate than a ritual road traced by smoke and rites. The family's work at the hearth is the border keeping that sends a person to Pitṛloka, the realm of the ancestors. Now, Agni as threshold, the practical theology. In Vedic practice, the sacrificial hearth is functional border control. The priest or sun places rice balls, clarified butter, and oblations upon the flame and names the dead. Agni consumes and conveys the offering to the Pitrs. The act of cremation or funeral disposal, Antyesti, and the subsequent Shraddha or Pindadana rites are the technologies that attempt to secure a place for the departed among the fathers. The ritual is juridical as well as affectionate. It re-establishes lineage claims, settles household duty, and supplies the deceased with what the texts imagine as the means of ongoing being. Now, primary textual witnesses, Vedic funeral hymns and later Brahmana prescriptions. Next, Pitṛloka, and the family ledger. What the household accomplishes at the hearth is to enroll the dead in the social ledger of the Pitrs. Pitrs are both ancestors and active benefactors. They may bless descendants if sustained, or cause misfortune if neglected. Here we have it again. Remember your beloved ones. Pitṛloka is often depicted as the abode where the fathers dwell, a place of continued social being rather than an abstract paradise. Status here depends largely on ritual efficiency and on the living's fidelity to duty. The lineage's performance is the afterlife's currency. Seasonal observance, Pitṛpaksha, and regular Shraddha services are institutionalized ways families repay debt obligation. And then, threshold acts and social technology, aka what must be done. So, practically speaking, the crucial threshold acts are, first, the funeral disposal itself, cremation in Vedic practice, though local and temporal variation exists. Second, the immediate oblations and recitation of mantras that send the person. And third, the continuing Shraddha or Pindadana rites that feed the Pitrs and stabilize the household's memory accounts. These rites are formulaic and public. The family's ritual performance is both social testimony and metaphysical instrument. Failure to perform them, or the absence of descendants, produces anxieties in the texts. A dead person without offerings is incomplete and at a risk of diminished presence. Then we have a precise cultural hinge, Yama and the first road. Although the hearth is the functional threshold, The Vedic hymns personify the road's patron in Yama, the first man who went before and became the lord of the departed in poetic imagination, similar to Vizier aka Osiris in the Egyptian mythology. Yama's hordes and the two hounds that accompany him are early visions of guided transits, but they do not displace the centrality of household rites. Even Yama's welcome is entered by the work of Agni and by correct observance. Later, Upanishadic texts will turn Yama into a philosophical interlocutor. The Nachiketa episode in the Katha Upanishad. But in the Vedic ritual frame, the door is still the hearth. Now, at the dusk, a low hearth glows. A son takes a pinch of rice, speaks the name, and lets the offering fall into the flame. Smoke curls upward like a road. Agni takes the gift and the name with it. Behind the house, the village waits. The family's ledger balanced for one more year. It is domestic, administrative, and tender. The threshold is the family's care. Since I mentioned Egypt, if the Egyptian gatekeepers prefer protocol and the Greek ferryman prefers coin, the Vedic household prefers a well-kept hearth and a punctual offering. So, keep your fire fed and your genealogies tidy. It is the original pension scheme. Transit and Psychopomps. Yama dogs and the road the first man walked. But the Greek shore has Charon, and the Egyptian night has gatekeepers with counting ledgers. The Vedic road is a family affair escorted by a mythic first traveler. Yama, the first man, who went ahead and became the lord of the departed, presides over the road to the fathers. A hospitable judge, a custodian of hospitality, and, in ritual imagination, a psychopomp king, whose hall receives the dutiful dead. But even Yama's welcome is conditioned by household work. You see, it is Agni who carries the offerings, and it is the living's rites that make the guest acceptable at the gates. Yama, the first traveler, myth and function. In the Vedic hymns, Yama is celebrated as the first to go forth and find the way to the fathers. A guide and exemplar who opens the route so others may follow. He is a figure of hospitable authority rather than arbitrary terror. His halls are hospitable for those who come with the right rites and offerings, and his jurisprudence is bound up with social memory and gracious reception. The poetic image places Yama as the canonical psychopomp who both receives and models the road thrice trodden. Then Agni and the sacrificial road, the technical escort. Agni, the sacred fire, remains the practical courier. In Vedic ritual, Agni consumes the offering at the hearth and conveys it, of course the name attached to it, to the Pitrs. He thereby makes the road visible. The funeral formulas, the recited mantras, and the Shraddha offerings function as the tickets and letters of introduction. Without them, the traveler arrives without any credentials. So, while Yama presides, Agni performs the necessary escort work and secures the passage in ritual terms. Yama's hounds and the road signs. The road is trademarked by a pair of hounds who accompany Yama, watchful dogs who scent the path and guard the thresholds. Vedic and later tradition attest to these hounds as the Psychopomps guardians. Four-eyed and later descriptions who track and permit passage. They are the mythic equivalent of border patrol, practical, understated, and efficient. Their presence underscores that even in a kindly Vedic economy, the way is policed, a correct arrival matters. And of course, mantras, formulae, and the following of passage. You see, transit is therefore manifold. First, the rite of funeral disposal and immediate mantras. Second, Agni's carrying of oblations. And third, the Shraddha ceremonies and Pinda offerings to sustain the Pitras thereafter. The Vedic corpus emphasizes the performative power of words and sacraments. Speak to him, place the Pinda, name the deads, and you secure both recognition and hospitality. Failure to secure these acts risks a diminished status for the deceased. Success is entry to the father's holds and goodwill in the domestic economy. And of course, exceptional narratives, Nachiketa and a philosophical turn. A famous exception reframes the Psychopomps teacher. In the Katha Upanishad, the youth Nachiketa meets Yama and presses for wisdom about death and herself. There, Yama becomes interlocutor, not merely host, and the dialogue moves the problem of passage from ritual efficacy to metaphysical knowledge. The episode is a pivot. It leaves intact the ritual road, but shows that the Vedic horizon already contains a reflective strain that asks whether there is a way beyond mere ritual provision. So, if Charon is curt and Neti meticulous, Yama's dog team is politely efficient, no nonsense, no small talk, and a marked preference for properly presented credentials. So keep your mantras neat and your pinda well rolled. God Inhabitants, Pitṛloka, the Fathers and Company. Pitṛloka is less a place mapped on a chart and more domestic horizon. The father's house reached by hearthwork, name-keeping and ritual labor. Where the dwarves roster keeps names in a ledger and the Greek shore counts tokens. The Vedic afterlives keep ancestors at the family table. Pitṛloka, the realm of the fathers, is the social outcome of a household that keeps doing its work. Offerings at the hearth, Shraddha ceremonies, and the annual Pitṛpaksha observances that feed the dead and keep names alive in a communal memory. The fathers, the Pitras, are not remote moral judges, so much as benefactors and claimants, family spirits who bless the house when properly tended and cause disorder if neglected. The smallest civic act, offering a pinda or pouring water with a mantra, is thus also a metaphysical lifeline. Now, Pitras and social being. In Vedic imagination, the Pitras are ancestors who partake in sacrificial share and who receive special oblations. Their welfare is directly tied to the living's ritual economy. Perform the Anjesti rites properly, maintain Shraddha, and the ancestors are enrolled among the fathers. Fail to do so, and a person risks the status of a preta or restless ghost. The notion is not merely sentimental, it is juridical and economic. Household continuity, inheritance, and lineage depend on ritual maintenance of the dead's name. Pitṛloka and what it looks like in the texts, because literary images vary. The Vedic hymns picture Yama's hospitable halls and the father's reception, a warm communal table for those whose rites were done, while later Brahmana and Upanishadic layers refine the idea of intermediate lokas, places occupied by ancestors or by the soul in transition. The Brihadaranyaka and other Upanishads begin to problematize the simple House of Fathers picture by treating the fate of the self, the Atman, and the possibilities of rebirth or release. But in the ritual world of households, Pitṛloka remains the practical, hopeful outcome of correct sacrifice and filial duty. The household technologies that make Pitṛloka work. Again, 3 practical acts matter most. First, the funeral disposal and immediate mantras that send the dead, Anjesti. Second, the Pinda and Shraddha rites that feed the Pitras afterward. And third, the seasonal observance of Pitṛpaksha, a concentrated fortnight of ancestral rite. Together, they are the social technology that converts memory into continued presence. Archaeology and ethnographic continuity show that these rites are public, formulaic, and often performed by sons or officiating priests, a civic sequence as much as a private devotion. Soul language and doctrinal developments. Vedic registers use a bundle of overlapping terms for what survives: Atman, the self, various ritual notions of the life, or Ashu, and the idea that the dead may be present as Pitras when invoked. Over time, the Upanishads pressed these motives into philosophical questions. The Katha Upanishad famously recast Yama as teacher, the Nachiketa episode, shifting attention from household ritual to the inquiry into the self and moksha. Later Puranic texts add still more, elaborating notions of Naraka, punitive states, karma, and cyclical rebirth. So, by the medieval horizon, the earlier ritual-centered picture coexists with an ethicized soteriology. For the moment, in Vedic practice, however, ritual efficacy and familial duty remain decisive. So, the practical effect and civic function, why families keep doing it. You see, the entire system is a social technology for continuity. By making the son or household responsible for feeding ancestors, Vedic ritual stabilizes property, legitimate lineage, and encourages reproductive and social continuity. It also provides consolation. Pitṛloka is a place where the dead have being, because someone remembers and feeds them. The ritual network produces social memory. The rites make the afterlife a continuance of domestic relation, rather than a purely private metaphysical fate. So, imagine a dust terrace, bowls of rice shaved into pindas. A sun touches the fire, the brimstone tones a name, and smoke threads its road upwards. A distant lamb, Yama's hall, imagined him close at the horizon. If Egypt asks for paperwork and Greece asks for tokens, the Vedic household asks only for a warm hearth and punctual attention. So keep the pinda well rolled and the mantras neat. It's the original domestic endowment plan. Judgment, reward, and cultural function. 2 roads, ritual and release. 2 roads converge and argue in the Vedic horizon. One paved by ritual, the other opening toward release, and both shape how people imagine life after death. The basic frame, ritual first, philosophy later. In the oldest Vedic world, the afterlife is overwhelmingly a matter of ritual efficacy. Perform Anjesti, feed the Pitras with Pinda and libation, and you have a plausible claim on Pitṛloka, the father's household. That is the pragmatic road. Offerings, mantras, and familial duty convert memory into continued social being. Over time, a second road appears in the tradition's inner conversations. The philosophical a way toward release, moksha, and the doctrines of karma and rebirth. The two do not cancel one another, so much as coexist and compete. Right secures the house of fathers. Inquiry asks whether the house itself is the real goal. Next, ritual mechanics, how one becomes a father, a Pitṛ. Practically, the Vedic system works like an intergenerational contract. The household performs the funeral rites, Agni conveys the offering, the Pitrs receive their share. The family's name and estate remain linked to ritual maintenance. Seasonal rounds, Pitṛ-bhaksha, annual shraddha, institutionalized ways the living keep that contract current. In social terms, this is not merely piety. It preserves lineage, legitimizes inheritance, and binds house to polity. Successful afterlife in the Vedic frame is thus social continuity enacted through exact rites rather than metaphysical verdicts. Philosophical reframing, Nachiketa, Atman, and the road beyond the rites. The Upanishads begin to ask a different question. Is the self down to household continuation, or does it transcend these cycles? You see, the Katha Upanishad stages the boy Nachiketa in Yama's hole, asking whether ritual knowledge secures the highest good. Yama's answers move the tradition away from a purely ritual economy toward inquiry about Atman, the self, and moksha, ideas that gradually undermine the assumption that ritual alone exhausts the afterlife question. Thus, Vedic religiosity contains its own self-critique. Rites matter, but they may not be the ultimate horizon. Later developments, karma, rebirth, naraka, and the Puranic map. In later strata, Brahmana, then Upanishad, then Smriti or Purana. The landscape becomes more doctrinal and variegated. The notion of karma and cyclic rebirth grows explicit. Texts elaborate naraka-like punitive states and moral consequences. Puranic and Smritic writings supply richly detailed post-mortem topographies. These later accounts partly moralize the earlier ritual logic. Good and bad conduct get tied to future birth and suffering, but they are historically subsequent expansions, not simple continuations of the earliest Vedic picture. So, in short, the ritual road remains foundational for householders. The reward or punishment map of later literature overlays an ethical calculus that builds into classical Hinduism. And lastly, moral versus technical reading, why both matter for society. So, read, sociologically, the Vedic blend is brilliant civic engineering. Ritual holds families accountable across generations. Philosophy offers an alternative for seekers and for communities that want a meaning not reducible to clan maintenance. The ritual track encourages procreation and property stability. The philosophical track opens the possibility that true liberation is not social perpetuity, but release from the whole cycle. Both answers teach different civic virtues, fidelity and continuity on the one hand, self-knowledge and detachment on the other. So, if you prefer a clear pension plan, keep the pinda flowing. If you prefer philosophical escape, ask Yama for directions, but mind his answers. Let us not do small talk.